It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with your Feel Good Breakfast Show. And right now, we are actually, in fact, putting our weekly So Now What segment on ice to cover a very serious issue that is obviously affecting the entire world right now, even us here in South Africa, which might be surprising. Now, as I'm sure you've heard, the Russian forces have launched now a full-scale invasion of neighboring Ukraine. This started last week, attacking various locations across the country. A number of people have already been killed and thousands have been displaced and had to flee their homes. So what exactly is at the root of this engagement, and how will this volatile situation impact our nation? It has in fact already started to do so economically, definitely. And we are joined by two experts in the field. One is head of the African Governance and Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, Stephen Grutz. Welcome, Stephen. We're also joined by political and security risk analyst Alia Vayas, who will weigh in on the discussion as well. Welcome to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us during a very confusing time for the world. Even here in South Africa, we are struggling to come to terms with what's going on. So, Alia, I'm going to start with you. Obviously, from across social media, we have seen both Russian and Ukrainian civilians vehemently against Putin's occupation of the Ukraine. So, whose war is this really, and what is the intended goal, Alia?
I think that's a very good question, Graham, to start off with. And I think it's been on the minds of analysts and civilians, as you said, over the last couple of days, especially. To start off with, Russia launched a full-scale invasion on Ukraine just about 7 days ago via land, air, and sea. And I think, asking whose kind of war is it has been very poignant, because there are different sides to this. And Russia's kind of said that we'd like to take back Ukraine. In simple terms, we'd like to take back Ukraine as part of Russian territory for apparent denazification of Ukraine. However, there's different kind of sides to this, saying that they aren't really Nazis or any kind of threat per se in Ukraine for the reason behind Russia's need to take back Ukrainian territory. However, I think, over the past couple of days, it's developed beyond that. I think the world is starting to ask, is this not a bigger kind of challenge to the Western-dominated and Western-created system of global governance, of international security, and definitions of, international law, territorial integrity, and sovereignty. And I think that's what we've, beyond these calls by civilians to kind of end the war on an immediate level in terms of humanitarian crises and casualties, we're starting to see bigger questions posed to the kind of global system of governance.
Stephen, does Ukraine stand a chance of holding the Russian military back? This feels like the ultimate David and Goliath scenario. What does Ukraine have that makes it so attractive to the Kremlin?
I think Ukraine's going to be hard-pressed to win this one on the battlefield. I think they've been incredibly brave and courageous in holding off the Russian assault to this point. But they are outgunned. We're hearing that Russia is stepping up the attacks. So I think sooner rather than later, Ukraine is going to want to support a peace process. They have sent their negotiators to a couple of meetings that have already been held on the Belarus border. But militarily, I think Ukraine's in a tough spot. I think diplomatically and in the social media sphere, I think they are winning the propaganda war hands down. I think they're winning the information war hands down. And we don't know how this one is going to end. I think we're going to be seeing worse before we see better.
Alia, obviously, when we talk about the worst, hundreds of innocent lives potentially being lost through this invasion, our focus obviously has to be on South African nationals that are stuck in the Ukraine. What is happening to those people right now? What are their options? Initially, when news came out, it felt like there was very little that South Africa could do to bring those people back to South Africa or get them out of the Ukraine. What is the status quo at the moment?
I think we're starting to see across Ukrainian cities, whether it's Kiev to the eastern and western borders of the country, it's very, very difficult to leave. Whether it's the airspace is closed, so there are no flights coming out of the country, and people are, kind of you're seeing on the news, people are piling into trains almost like sardines under immense conditions of distress, trying to get out. And South African nationals have appealed to our government and to the embassy over there and embassies across Europe to kind of help in any way. To kind of to get them out of the country, and I think we've done a good job so far, albeit a little bit late. Many South Africans are starting to return, either to return home or to return to or to go to European countries surrounding Ukraine. I think for any civilian trapped in Ukraine, even Ukrainian nationals, it's a really distressing situation that we're seeing. And as Stephen said, I think the worst is yet to come in terms of the fact that Russia's military invasion shows no signs of cessation, and we're seeing kilometers at length of Russian troops still piling into the country. So I think it's about to get worse.
Yep, we will brace for the storm to continue. We're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. Thanking both of our guests so much for opening a window into the conflict as it stands at the moment. And we will continue to explore what's going on in the Ukraine in just a moment. Stick around.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back as we continue to unpack the tenuous situation in the Ukraine with Alia Valles and Stephen Grutz. And so we are now delving a little deeper into its implications on us here in South Africa, because there is a global impact. Stephen, I'm going to pick up with you. So a petition calling on our government not to get involved in the conflict has amassed some 30,000 signatures to date. Is this one we should be sitting out? What motivation would we have for getting involved? Where does South Africa sit in the bigger dynamic?
So South Africa has flip-flopped a little bit on this. Firstly, we didn't say much at all. Then DIRCO, the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, put out a statement on the 23rd, just before the war, saying basically both sides must come to the table. Then when the war broke out, we put out another statement which said Russia must immediately withdraw its troops. And then after that, at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva and in the UN General Assembly in New York, we went back to saying we're not picking sides, we must resolve this peacefully, and we refuse to blame anybody for it, especially Russia. Russia hardly mentioned in those last two statements that I'm mentioning. I mean, this war is going to affect us. The petrol price has already gone up. It's going to affect grain supplies from Ukraine, wheat, rye, barley. All of these things are staples in our bread. It's going to affect the rand. It's going to affect your pension. It's going to affect your stock portfolio. It's a very volatile time. And also for moral reasons. I think this, for me, and this is my opinion, is a clear-cut case of abrogation of international law, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of a peaceful member state. And I think South Africa yesterday abstained on a UN General Assembly vote on this very issue. We were one of 35 countries to abstain. But I don't think history is going to judge us that we have done the right thing. We also are strong allies of Russia in the BRICS grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And that's where we stand.
Economically, as you've pointed to, Stephen, there is obviously a massive implication for the entire world. Alia, I'm going to turn to you now. Russia and the Ukraine, obviously both big exporters of oil. That's been front and center in the news. As Stephen mentioned, wheat, other staple commodities that we ourselves use. So what is the current knock-on effect that this war is having on the South African economy? And what is the long-term implication, do you think, for our economy, looking at the way the world is reacting to what's going on?
I think Stephen touched on a lot of the kind of economic impact by saying, in the short term, we're definitely going to feel every day, ordinary South Africans are really going to feel it in their pocket. The petrol price increase was yesterday a record increase kind of over a rand. Again, wheat, barley, rye, essential goods that make up part of every South African's grocery list, are definitely going to prices will definitely increase. I think in the long term, we're going to economically in the long term, I think South Africa as a country needs to start either kind of taking the punch on the chin. And kind of accepting the fact that these markets are volatile and these prices are going to continue to increase in the long term, or continue to fluctuate, or we're going to start having to diversify where we're getting these, where we're getting our oil, where we're getting our wheat, and other kind of products that are going to be affected. I think politically, as Stephen mentioned, our flip-flopping position is going to be constantly under criticism and under scrutiny by ordinary South Africans or kind of the international system, where we're going to have to start taking not necessarily a side but a stronger stance. I think even if it is the stance of mediating, of calling different parties to the negotiation table, I think as a country we're going to have to embrace the responsibility of being a bit stronger in our stance on the conflict. And I think, as you mentioned, ordinary South Africans, in the petition to not get involved, that is in itself quite a strong stance. So those are my opinions. I think, as the war, as the invasion kind of unfolds, I think various countries may put a bit of pressure on us. Whether it is the BRICS grouping that we're a part of, whether it is Western countries that have particular investments in South Africa. I think if it doesn't come from internally in our country, it will definitely, the pressure to be stronger in our voice or stronger in a particular stance will come from the outside.
Stephen, I'm going to wrap up with you now, and feeding off what both of you have said. Yeah, how will this conflict affect South Africa's position as a BRICS nation? How do you see our role over the next, the foreseeable future, and what sort of pressures are going to be put on us? Do you see this coming out as in that mediator's role? Are we going to have to pick a side? Are we going to have to take a firmer stance? How do you see our position in BRICS, and BRICS, in fact, as an entity? How is their role going to change now that we've been almost the world has been forced to polarize?
So I think the BRICS is under pressure, but so far I think Russia would be very pleased with what they've done. India abstained in the Security Council. China abstained in the Security Council. Brazil was actually the only country that voted yes on this General Assembly resolution. So far BRICS has held, and so far I think Russia's got a good result from its BRICS partners who have supported it. South Africa doesn't want to be in the position to choose either the BRICS or the West. I think it really wants to have good relations with both. We strive to do that. I think South Africa has rightly called for mediation, called for the UN to step in and try and resolve this conflict. We are a possible mediator. I'm not sure whether Ukraine would feel that we are neutral enough, given our long-standing ties with Russia from struggle days, etc.
It's still a little bit confusing, but I think from our standpoint, just to know that there is a focus on the human rights elements, that is the most important thing. We don't want to lead to further polarization. Thanking you both so much for taking the time to unpack this. I think only time will tell where this conflict is going to lead. What we do know is that claiming another country based on colonial history has never ended well. Past imperialism can never justify present-day expansionism. But one thing I would suggest is go and do your own research and just be wary of just accepting what you see on social media.